Welcome back. Sunset Museum as well. We learned that it was 31 years since Andrew Caddick's 9 for something, and we've got his boots in the museum. Right, there's still some coffees, teas there and biscuits. I don't want to take any biscuits home, so please grab as many as you like for that. And Spencer. Right, main event. We're absolutely delighted to welcome head coach Jason Kerr today, and just for your info, we're actually, it's being live. Oh, a little clap. And just for your info, it's being live streamed, I think, on the Somerset YouTube channel. But just for your info, it's actually only on Spencer and Jason, so that none of you are being featured on that. Right, without further ado, I'll hand over to Spencer.
Spencer, how much did you pay to go on?
How much did I pay?
Yeah, we go on the tube.
Oh, lots. We'll talk about it later, Mr. Tomlinson. Good evening, good morning. It's been that kind of day. Sorry, that's good stuff. Well, you know, I just got scared and intimidated by the fact it's being live streamed. As Perry said, it is being live streamed, so please don't swear. Hopefully, you can swear after 9 o'clock, but hopefully we'll be done by then, so you can just do that at home. It gives me great pleasure, obviously, to welcome Somerset County Cricket Club head coach. It was nice of you to bring them on because she clapped early. But ladies and gentlemen, Jason Kerr. He said it is just the two of us who are being featured in it, so if you have blagged the day off work and told them you're ill and actually just come here for a bit of a chat and some biscuits, then it's absolutely fine. Hopefully you can hear us at the back. It's just that you've got to take the microphone away from your mouth, otherwise it's a little bit like the train arriving at platform 4.
Tom, they'll change.
Let's start at the start, I guess, Jessica. Obviously, those who may not know you, you do have a broad Somerset accent, but you're not originally from these Euro parts. I'm Jessica, so tell us a little bit about growing up in Bolton, which I believe is just north of the M4. How did you get involved in cricket at a young age? Was it always going to be cricket, or did you have you know, dreams as a youngster of kicking balls around Burnham Park, or was it always cricket for you?
Morning everybody. I played all sports. I was incredibly fortunate. My father was a really keen sportsman locally, so I was heavily into football till the end of football season, then heavily into cricket once it became cricket season. And as Spence alluded to, I learned my trade up north, and played for Lancashire certainly as a youngster through their age groups. I was incredibly fortunate in some respects. I was at an England trial, England under-17s at Liverpool, which used to be the national centre a long time ago. And someone from Yorkshire, actually, a guy called Steve Alden, spoke to me about trying to sign for Yorkshire at the time. And you didn't go across the Pennines then, that's for sure. So I made a phone call to a friend of mine who actually worked for the PFA, so he was actually involved in football. So to cut the story very short, he was a good friend of Bob Cotton, who'd just taken over Somerset as head coach a long time ago. I won't refer to the year. And then the phone rang. We didn't have mobile phones, and then the house phone rang, and it was Bob Cotton asking me if I'd like to come down to Somerset. And ironically, I played there the year before. For those in the room that are old enough, I stayed at the County Hotel, which is Marks and Spencer's now. I played again here against Caddick. He was really friendly at that time. So he was, I don't know if you remember, it was a year he was playing second team cricket, and he was qualified. He got 96 wickets in about 8 games. It was ridiculous. Somerset had an unbelievable team. Both Parsons were playing. Kenny Benjamin was on trial, the West Indian. Ken McLeod, Neil Malinder. And we actually played here at the county ground. And as I say, we stayed at the county hotel. We got beat comprehensively. We got bowled out for 50 in the second innings. And the rest is history in that respect. I came down one weekend, spent that at a net in the indoor school with Andre Van Troost and Andy Caddick. So that was a baptism of fire. And was offered the opportunity to sign as a youngster. I was 17 at the time. Obviously, up until that point, I was wanting to play for Lancashire, and their second team was ridiculously strong. You know, their guys, Ronnie Irani, Nick Speed, Graham Lloyd, all guys that went on to represent Lancashire for a long time. They were in the second teams. There was very limited opportunity. And before you knew it, over the weekend, I'd signed a contract, and the rest is history. Came to Somerset in the March.
You mentioned some of the England youth games that you played. There were some fairly decent cricketers in those England youth squads with you, weren't there? Now you're testing me, Spence.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had the England 19 side. I was incredibly fortunate. That was under 17s at the time. I had 1 year at Somerset, which was an education in itself. It was my introduction to professional cricket, where we had a full fixture list. Played far more cricket than you do now as a second teamer. Peter Robinson was a head coach, so for those that know Robbo, that was an education in itself. And when I find myself quoted in there, that's quite a challenging moment for myself mentally, honestly. But yeah, so I had a year second team cricket and then managed to go on an England tour to India. And we were actually successful. We won a test match out there, the first England team to win a test match for a long time. And we had probably 9 of those guys go on to have successful first class careers. Michael Vaughan went on and obviously played for England. But we had the likes of Glenn Chappell, Matt Walker, who's head coach at Kent now. There's a guy, Mark Broadus, who played for Yorkshire for a while, was incredibly quick. Unfortunately, lost his way. But it was an interesting time.
How does a young lad from Bolton, which, let's face it, may as well be on the moon? Well, exactly. How did you settle down here? So I'm assuming you didn't know that many people, and you know people like Van Troost and Caddick throwing balls at you in a gentle underarm fashion. How difficult was it for you to make that move and to settle somewhere so far from home?
It was actually incredibly easy. I mean, I look back now, I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I literally, over the space of a weekend, told my mum and dad I'm moving to Somerset. My dad drove me down, and that was it. But I was fortunate that there was another lad that signed at the same time, a guy called Andy Payne. He was on the Somerset staff for about 3 years. And I lived in a house on Winchester Street, which I think belonged to Dennis Brightwell at the time. And in there was another lad, Andy Cotton, who was son of Bob Cotton, who was the coach at the time, a left-arm spinner. And they became certainly lifelong friends. And then towards the back end of the year, Matt Robinson, who went to King's School, went on to play rugby for Wales. So he was living there as well. And then some little fella called Triscothic moved in at the end of the year. So they were like my new family. So as a friendship group, we had an incredible time. We caused havoc. We got called into Peter Anderson's office on numerous occasions. And that was an education in itself. It was like you had 17, 18-year-old lads living together. It's the first time we all effectively moved away from home. So we learned some life skills quite quickly, and some took longer than it should have done, that's for sure. But the transition for me was seamless. I loved playing sport, I loved playing cricket, and suddenly I was in we talk about it a lot now, but a family around Somerset. And it certainly took me a while as a cricketer to become part of that family, but certainly as a person and the people around the area were incredibly welcoming. And this is home now.
Let's talk about the first class debut. Somerset against Australia. It was a fairly weak Australian side. I think it was Slater, Taylor, Boone, Ward, McDermott, Vaughan, May, and fellow with the mustache, Hughes. I think never went on to do anything, did he? Bit of a baptism of fire that, but did you feel at that point that you'd arrived? Did you feel that you deserved to be there? And what was it like playing against that fairly average Australian side?
Yeah, I certainly didn't feel like I belonged. Look, it was incredible, because again, it's really hard to explain, but I guess why I've got a lot of empathy for the young players now is that you just want to play cricket. And then suddenly when you get the opportunity playing against people that you watched on TV, I was incredibly fortunate. When I was really young, I went to Old Trafford to watch England play Australia. But it's an unbelievable experience. My first ball in first class cricket was off Shane Warne. So the late great Shane Warne. I went to hit it through mid-wicket, it went through point. I should have quit then. But just on the same field, I mean, Steve Waugh was one of my heroes growing up. Certainly as a young player, someone I think probably the way he played the game, the amount of resilience and character that he demonstrated on numerous occasions, to suddenly be playing against him was an unbelievable experience. And we had an opportunity to win that game actually. We played some reasonable cricket, we didn't, but we had an opportunity to.
At the top.
Yeah. But it was incredible because then, like, we had full house here at Taunton, and like the old school warm-up is they do a lap of the ground, and then they got a standing ovation as they went around the ground, and it was like one of those sort of spine-tingling moments where you're like, wow, this is a bit different. Because they're icons, legends of the game, and the 93 series was unbelievable, not for England, for Australia. So, you know, to make your first class debut, when you want to be a professional cricketer, that's the first step on the ladder where you've got an opportunity to play, do that for a living. But the real test is obviously the higher up you go, and then to challenge yourself against some of the best players in the world was great fun, great memories.
I think the first class 5 was against the West Indies, is that right? Couple of wickets back to back as well.
I should have just played Test cricket. I don't know what happened. Yeah, the tourist games I did all right, to be fair, for a pretty average cricketer. But against the West Indies, I had a couple of games. I got my first 5 for first class cricket. You know, I'll never forget Richie Richardson again, another guy I grew up watching, absolute legend. I love the way he played the game. But a really strong West Indian side, and it was a really clean wicket. And he won the toss, and he was like, it looks a bit juicy, but I think we'll have a bat. And you could say, again, the crowd had come to watch the tourists, there's no doubt, because we bowled them out and we didn't really get clapped off. They were disappointed that we bowled the West Indies out. And I managed to get 5 for that day, which, you know, and then later on we played them again, later on in my career, and yeah, I managed to get a hat-trick against the West Indies as well. So, yeah, maybe I should have just took to playing tourist games and that was it.
Making the transition into the sort of the first team dressing room, was there anyone who had like a big influence on you, or there was someone that you, as the young players, looked up to? Is there someone that welcomed you, or who was the player that had the biggest influence on you, and stopped you being that trouble-making rabble-rouser from Winchester Street to actually thinking, actually, if I follow this advice, I could make it in tourist game?
Yeah. Look, I think, again, one thing that's very different now is the dressing room environments. We were really lucky, we had some incredible senior players. I mean, in my first year we had Chris Cabaret, and as a character he was super over the young players. Once you brought down a couple of barriers, but he was incredibly encouraging. And then as you move through, we had Mushtaq Ahmed here for a few years as overseas, and he was an incredible character. He was so positive, incredibly supportive, and incredibly encouraging for young players, because the dressing room, as I say, was different. There was very much a seniority of the cap players and then the young players, whereas now you look at the dressing room, the young players take the mickey out of the senior players. It's so different. But there was, again, I mean, Jamie Cox, when he came as captain, was incredibly influential, very good leader, made people feel at ease. But the dressing rooms were the coaches in those days. You'd spend a lot of time talking about the game and learning from experiences. I can remember we played Hampshire, and Robin Smith and Mark Nicholas, and I was bowling against them during the day. And then Peter Bowler, who was the captain at the time, dragged me out of our dressing room into their dressing room at the close of play, and made me sit and talk to them about what they'd experienced and what they thought my strengths were and weaknesses. And they're incredible. It was incredibly daunting at the time, but they're great learnings. And unfortunately that's changed in the game now. It doesn't happen very often, but it was very much led by senior players, and that's where a lot of your learning took place.
You mentioned obviously playing debut, you talked about hat-trick and 5 for. What was your favourite moment in a Somerset shirt? Was it the 7th for 23? I think against Leicestershire. Was that your favourite moment, or was it being involved in the squad that broke the trophy drought, or playing the final, part of the team that finally lifted that Somerset trophy for the first time since the 80s? What, if you had to pick one, what would be your highlight in a Somerset team?
It's a great question. I think there's 2 that spring to mind. I think if you look at it individually, there's some performances. A game against the West Indies where we've touched on, I got runs and wickets. And it was the game, I don't know if you remember, but Andre van Troost hit Jimmy Adams in the face. And so that evening I went with Andre to the hospital to see him, which was interesting because a few of the West Indian players were there. But while we were there, the players were incredibly complimentary about me as an individual, and that gave me a lot of belief, which is something, again, as a player I struggled with, self-confidence. But I think there was a year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that year. Did we finish second in the championship that year as well, when we won? Yeah, I'm asking you, Spence. Yeah. But I think there was a time when Dermot Reeve was coach, Jamie Cox was captain, and we changed the philosophy of the club in terms of how we wanted to play our cricket. And it was the most enjoyable time through a season I'd had as a Somerset player. It was the most cricket I played. I played about 13 championship games without getting injured, so that was a huge bonus. And just that season in itself, because it's sport and it's something that as youngsters we do because we love it. And you can lose sight of that when you become a professional sportsman. And for that year it was fun. We worked incredibly hard. We did really well on the field. And I think those two go together pretty well. So it was a year where, I think it was 99 off the top of my head, where we were playing good cricket, but the way we celebrated each other's success and enjoyed playing was certainly one memory that I'm incredibly fond of.
Who is your favourite teammate when you were playing here at Somerset? Not necessarily the best player, and remember there's a watershed and it's going out live, so maybe forget certain stories. But who do you think was your best teammate during your time at Somerset?
I'm going to have to give you a couple of answers here, because certainly Trez. So Trez is my best mate. We lived together, grew up together. Our careers took different paths, that's for sure, from a cricket point of view. But certainly as a lifelong friend, Trez is definitely, as I say, my best mate. But I think there's a couple of other relationships, like Mushy when he was here was incredible. So whenever I see him on the cricketing circuit now, it's like when you see a lost long friend and the friendship kicks in straight away. So for someone who was so young and, as I said, of Mushtaq's calibre, to have that belief in me, but also the friendship. And then I don't know if you remember a guy called Mark Lathwell. So I played Lathwell's got 200 at Bath. I don't know if you remember when we used to play at the Bath Festival, which was incredible. And I roomed with Lathwell for 4 days. So it was my first year on the staff. I was doing 12 man. We didn't speak for 4 days. Like, he gave me nothing. And we were in different times. I was out a bit later than I should have been. But we became really good friends when we eventually spoke to each other. He had an incredible sense of humour, an incredible passion for the game, and certainly the way he played the game. And so my time at Somerset, I really enjoyed Lathers. It was a real shame when he left the club. But eventually, as I say, once we did forge a relationship and a friendship, it was I enjoyed his company a lot.
We were going to, because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, we were going to have a bit of chat about mental health a little bit later on in the conversation. But the fact that you've brought up, that you struggle with self-belief, we've brought up Mark Lathwell. I think it's important now, isn't it, in the modern era, that the work that goes on to make players mentally tough is equally as important, isn't it, as the work that makes them physically tough. How much of an element is the mental health taken into consideration now that you're a coach when it comes to players' well-being and that sort of thing?
Look, it's huge. I think, I talk to my staff a lot. I think the easy thing to coach is cricket. And what I reinforce with them the whole time is that you're dealing with people and you're managing people. And their well-being, their happiness, however you want to package it, is so important. Because I'll go back to, when you're young, whatever sport you play it because you love it. And that gets distorted along the way for lots of different reasons. And with the attention from social media and the negativity around that, I think it's huge. So we spend a huge amount of time on who they are as people, managing the human being, coaching the human being. And as I say, I think the cricket's the easier bit. So it's huge for me as a coach, part of my philosophy. And so I think the more you understand the individual, and actually, people talk about, what makes them tick. It's not that, it's actually, right, do you actually understand the clarity of their thinking when they're out there? And can they enjoy it? So I think it's hugely important for me as a coach, but it's hugely important for the wider game that we're very aware of the individuals that are playing it.
What sort of options are available for players? What does the club put in place to ensure that people's mental health is where it needs to be? We look at organisations like the PCA who have done an incredible job, and potentially had the PCA been a thing 30 years ago, we might be sitting in the Mark Lathwell pavilion, for example. A lot of work has gone on to improve that side of the game, but what is the club doing to make sure that everyone is where they need to be on the field and off the field?
A huge amount, and again, from we do leads to performance. We want the guys to be as successful as they want to be as individuals. They've all got aspirations to play international cricket, and we want them to fulfil that potential. And the biggest anchors are themselves and the narrative around the game and their thinking. So there's a huge amount that we do as a club. From a communication point of view, the way we practice, a lot of the work that you see from the coaches is not what you see out there. It's the amount of time that they spend with the players. We're constantly talking about having a transparent environment, giving them the opportunities, and some are more forthcoming than others. There's no doubt. I think that sport itself is quite archaic in that players often feel that if I divulge something, then it's going to affect selection, etc., etc. So I have to keep reinforcing messages that actually that's not what it's about. My job's to help them. It's not to deselect them. And ultimately, we want to give them the opportunity, as I said, to perform at their best for as long as they can. And then aside from that, we're constantly making them aware of what resources are available. And like you mentioned, the PCA is an incredible resource. And then encouraging them to speak, certainly if they need to.
As a man of a certain age, I won't obviously say how old you are, 50. Obviously, 50. We grew up in an era where things were very different and feelings weren't necessarily talked about. Mental health wasn't necessarily a thing. How much credit does your best mate Marcus deserve for dragging the issue of mental health into the mainstream and making it a thing that people now genuinely are affected by, and something that is considered genuinely an issue that needs to be dealt with?
Yeah, huge amount of credit, hence why it keeps getting OBE, MBE, whatever, I don't know what's next. And rightly so. To be close to him and to see that unfold was, it's an experience that you don't want to go through. Because I think we'd all agree his career was obviously cut short. He'd have gone on to be the greatest player probably to ever play for England, but more so from a personal point of view is that someone who you see that they're not the person that they used to be. So the cricket aside, it's actually to see someone go through that and then to actually talk about it and to be as transparent and open as he was, I thought was incredible. Because I had some stuff that I could have put in his book, but he wouldn't let me. It was a bit disappointing. But I think, for me, again, what we're doing even in society now is we're putting labels on things. So it's mental health, to me it's about personal well-being, and we're encouraging people to talk, to share as much as possible. And I think the more we can continue to do that, the better.
And how do you deal with the pressure? Obviously, you struggle as a player. Obviously, as a coach, you're not just worrying about your own performance as you were as a player. You've got to worry about all 26 of those guys, plus whatever's going on in the background and various bits of paperwork and all that sort of thing. How do you make sure that it doesn't become too much for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think, over time you develop coping strategies, and I think I've got quite I'd say I've got a really good philosophy and outlook on how I see the game. Inevitably, as a head coach, there's a shelf life to that, so I'm quite comfortable at some point, whether it's Andy, Harry, or whoever it is, going to have to come to me and say, look, your time's done. So I can genuinely be as authentic and do the job how I want to do the job. And obviously we're trying to win things, but within that, more importantly, is I want to develop people. So I'm really comfortable in my own skin, and I think the journey I've been on as a cricketer, and certainly early as a coach, I've got incredible confidence in my coaching ability and in my ability to manage the group. So I don't really feel the pressure. I hear the noise whether it's an individual not doing particularly well or we're not winning games, but I'm also realistic. I think we achieve incredibly well as a club. We punch massively above our weight and we'll continue to do that. And we want to win things. That's why we're here. But more importantly than that is the process and developing people. I'm equally as proud of some of the guys that have left the club and gone on to be really successful outside of Somerset because of who they are as people. And sometimes we get caught up a little bit in the result. So my philosophy and my outlook on it is that actually I don't really feel the pressure anymore. I think one of my best learnings was, I don't know if you recall, probably 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we lost the first 3 games of the year we played Essex here, and we had to bowl them out for 80 to win the game, and they were 50 for 8 maybe. Craig was phenomenal, got 13 in the game. And I was sat on the balcony watching that game, and two things happened. Is one, that my daughter got some abuse on social media, so that I was infuriated by that. But it made me realise very quickly that if we won that game, I'm the best coach in the world, and if we lost that game, I'm the worst coach in the world. And I was like, this is pathetic. And it was great learning, because since that day, it's not that I don't care, but how I see the world outside of the dressing room, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. Because actually, as long as I know I've done everything I can, we prepare the guys as best they can. I know they're giving 100%. Inevitably, what will be. And I think, as I said, I was brilliant learning the fact that actually the pressure of the game I don't feel. I do feel other pressures, the demanding role that it is, and obviously wanting the guys to be incredibly successful. But from a team point of view, it's it's great fun.
And 2 trophies in 4 years, don't they? Let's move on to, obviously, everything comes to an end eventually, and you left Somerset for Derbyshire. How did it feel to have to leave where had become your home, where you set up roots and go up the M5 and play for somebody else? How did that feel?
It felt awful. It really did. I think for a multitude of reasons. But I'd fallen out with the coach at the time. But again, great learnings for me. The coach at the time, who we're great friends now by the way, but the coach at the time said something early season and didn't stick to that. And the learning for me is actually you can't make promises if you don't keep them. So I'm incredibly cautious when I speak to some of the players, because if you deliver a message, they take it as gospel, and you have to be really careful. And once that trust has gone between a coach and a player, it's never coming back. So my journey at Somerset had come to an end. And yeah, it was, Peter Anderson was brilliant to me at the time and was, trying to keep me at the club. But I wanted to find out how good I could be in a slightly different role. My first year at Derby was really successful on the field. But my love for the club hadn't gone. The first thing I did was, every score you look at was the Somerset score. Obviously, seeing my friends are doing it as well. So it was a really difficult time to actually choose to leave the club, because I'd fallen in love with the place, which it does that to you. Something strange in the water down here. But Jamie spoke about it, coming back to the club. There's a real feeling of family at this club, and once you do become part of it, it's incredibly hard to let go. And I think you see that with a lot of players that leave the club, they stay around the area. So yeah, it was a difficult time for me, but I look back now and there's some great learnings in that as well.
Then, unfortunately, the body gave up, and the career came to an end. How do you deal with that, knowing that you've spent your entire life doing the job that you love doing, to find out that it now has to come to an end, and you've got to find something else to do, and potentially, heaven forbid, get a proper job?
Yeah, that's the scary bit. I was really fortunate, because I'd shoulder surgery. My first year at Derby was really successful on the field, and we actually did okay as a team. But I found out a lot about myself as a cricketer, so that was good. But I went in for an exploratory operation, and then came out and my shoulder was in a really bad way. So it was attached to me like this for the next 7 weeks. And I tried to get fit the next year, but I knew I was struggling. I needed longer in rehab. And the Derby were good. They offered me a new contract if I was fit in September. But it was about the June time where I decided that I went for dinner with my father, and I couldn't do it. I'd had a lot of injuries in my career, and I was constantly battling to get back to play rather than playing and trying to get better at playing. And the frustration had got a little bit too much, so I can remember just going out for dinner with my dad and said, "Oh, I think I'm done." And he was like, "What do you mean you're done?" I said, "I think I'm going to retire." And so we had a conversation about it. He was incredibly supportive. And so the next morning I went in to see the chief exec at Derby and just said, "Look, I'm going to retire at the end of the year." I carried on playing as a batter in the second team and was doing really well. So again, there's a lot of things where I averaged 100 in the second team with a bat, scored some runs, and then there was an opportunity for a batter to play, ironically here at Taunton, and it was the game James Hill just made his debut against Derby. and I wasn't selected for that, so I know I'd made the right decision, and I was really comfortable with that. But that did leave me with the challenge of trying to find something else to do.
And was it Bridgewater who stepped in and offered you a path back into cricket?
Yeah, look, I mean, I was really lucky. My contract ran for another 6 months, so I played a little bit of golf, and enjoyed myself a little bit. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I worked in a local company in the finance world. I was a mortgage advisor for a while, so if anybody needs a mortgage, it's not a good time. And so, thank you. So I did that approximately for about 4 months. And then Mike Moran from Bridgewater approached me, asked me if I wanted to play and coach. And at the time, I had no interest whatsoever. I didn't want to play cricket again. And then he managed to talk me into, I don't know how actually, but he managed to talk me into going to a training session at Haygrove School in Bridgewater. And it was superb. And the reason it was superb is they just took the mickey out of me for 2 hours. And it reminded me of the cricket club, Tom Cricket Club, when I was a kid. It reminded me of being back at my club when I was a young boy. And so I decided to play for them and do a little bit of coaching. And absolutely loved it. Great people. Played incredibly competitive cricket, probably a bit too far sometimes. And so I fell in love with the game again. And then, so that was 2005 I was there. And that coincided with me being, ironically, coming back here as a second team physio. I bet not many of you knew that. I was second team physio for about 2 weeks. Not because I wasn't very good. It just coincided with Andy Hurry leaving to go to Dubai, and then they needed someone to take on the second team, and Brian Rose was in position at the time and offered me the second team job. So the stars aligned a little bit, which is a long time ago.
And how did the job from second team physio manifest itself? You went from second team physio to essentially pathway lead, with a bit of a jump in between.
Yeah, so the shortest story of this was that I don't know if you remember, but Andy Hurry started at the club as the fitness instructor. And we've had a relationship going back a long time. But he said, I've got a job for you. And I was still playing, I was still on Somerset staff, it was my last year. He said, I've got a job for you. I was like, yeah? And that was the end of the conversation, he walked off. And I thought, that's a bit bizarre. Anyway, I left the club. So I don't know what he knew that I didn't know, but I did. I came back just to do the second team physio job. I interviewed with Mark Garraway, Andy Hurry and someone else. And I was in a position where, fortunately, I could just take any, because they paid peanuts, still do pay peanuts, you know. It literally didn't pay any money, but I wanted to get back into cricket. And so that first 2 weeks, I was involved in a lot of cricket conversations. And I was determined to be authentic and true to myself, I guess, at the time. And that obviously had an impact. So I was offered a second team job then for the rest of the year on a sort of trial basis. So that was 2005. We won the Blast then, yep, just remind myself. And at the end of that year, I then took on the second team and the academy full time. So I guess the element of fortune, it wasn't something that I was looking to do particularly at the time. But then fell in love with coaching. Because my first year as second team coach, you had Caddick, Stephen Jones, Ben Phillips, Ian Blackwell, Richard Johnson, these guys in the second team. That was fun, let me tell you. But it was a brilliant education for myself because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So suddenly you're in a position where you're having to try and manage these guys, and some, or a lot of them I'd obviously played with. But it was unbelievable learning, and the beauty about Rosie at the time, he just let me get on with it. So there was no one telling me what to do or what not to do. So it was the best learning ground I could possibly have had.
And the pathway was quite good, wasn't it? There's a couple of players in the last 20 years that have snuck into the first team for the Somerset pathway.
Yeah, and again, it was a baptism of fire. I inherited the academy from Kevin Shine, who had left to go to be the England bowling coach. And And the beauty again was that I had no parameters on me at all. I was suddenly in a role where I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but wanted to learn quickly. So I looked at Barcelona, Ajax, looked at a lot of, I guess, incredibly successful pathways, and tried to look at their DNA and what they do. But one thing I was adamant when I took over was, all right, I wanted Somerset to have the best academy in the country, and for that to become then the Man United of cricket. One can't say that now, no, really. But if you had an opportunity 10 years ago, 15 years ago to go to Man United, you'd have travelled all over the country, you wouldn't care. You'd have made the effort to get there and have a trial, train, whatever it might have been. So that was my philosophy, is that I wanted to create the best academy in the country. And very quickly I realised it was about character. It was different things that we needed to try and produce players, and I inherited some good players obviously as well. We had a lot of fun, but that was I knew how important it was to the supporters to have homegrown players come through. But I didn't just want people playing for Somerset. I think it's important that you get people through, play for England, and the byproduct is like Trez, they play for Somerset for a number of years and have a huge impact on the community. So we set about doing things differently, and it was brilliant. I think it's still probably one of the most rewarding jobs, is when you identify a young player like a Lewis Gregory at 12. I actually watched, the first time I watched him play, he got naught. But the thing that impressed me is the way he fielded, and he ran someone out. So his attitude in the field and the character he demonstrated at such a young age, I was like, right, I'm taking him onto the academy. And no, he's a pain in the arse. But he can play.
You say it, it's fine. I say it, apparently not. Then obviously you went on to become a bowling coach, and I think Dave Houghton came in to become a batting coach, and then obviously a change of hierarchy, and yourself and Andy Hurry came in 2019. How important is it that a lot of the time we see Somerset promoting from within, you know, interviewing externally, but a lot of the time the best candidate for the job has come from within the structure? What do you think that is?
Look, first thing I'd say is you need the best people. You know, I've got an incredible team around me, so I'm fortunate in that sense. But if I was running a business, I'd have the same philosophy: is you need the best people in the right positions. And I think there's something unique about this club. Someone said a word to me ages ago, I can't remember it. But there's something so unique about this club, is you have to understand it. I think, again, a lot of my learnings from a coaching point of view happened when I was a player, both pros and cons. And so often when you go through that process of recruitment, they understand the DNA, they understand what it takes, they understand the connectivity to the community, how important cricket is in the southwest. Because it's more than just a job here. Like Andy Hurry, you know, does pros and cons, but does a ridiculous job. But the amount of time that he puts into this place, and not because he wants to, it's because he loves it. He absolutely loves this place, and so you need people that are going to go above and beyond. And often that comes from understanding the organisation. So, you know, I could preach about this or get on my soapbox. I think it's so important for us as an organisation. And, you know, the excitement around Jamie Cox playing back as chief executive, again, as a player, he understands the DNA of the club. Lots changed in the game over the last 20 years or so. But there's an excitement now that he understands what we're trying to achieve. So I'm looking forward to, I guess, the next few months and years with Coxie.
Is he not now Mr. Cox?
So I've got a nickname, I'm going to tell you, but I've got a nickname. So I've got a nickname that 3 people use, and Jamie Cox is one of them. So years ago, someone said something, it was misheard, and so when I see Giles White, who played here, obviously when I was my first year in '92, I think it was, whenever I see him, he says the same thing, and everyone looks around and like, who's he talking to? And since Coxie's been back, he's like, all right, a bit. So it's definitely Coxie.
You touched on it there, the game has changed a lot in 20 years, it's changed a lot in 10 years. You've experienced it obviously back then as a player, before then as a fan, and now as a coach. Is the game better now or then?
I'd say it's different, so I'm going to sit on the fence, because again, I'm only one of those coaches because back in my day, but I think so much has changed that the comparatives you can't. Like Caddick was phenomenal when I mean, God, Caddick at his best was ridiculously good. And then you look at the game now, the big guys who you go, they're not as good as Caddick, but the records are ridiculously better than Caddick's. And it's the surfaces, it's the amount of cricket, the way cricket's played now, the intensity of it. So I think that I'm not one of those people who wants to compare generations. I think it is what it is right now. It's a great product. There's some phenomenal cricketers out there. And the game wants to be played in fast forward. I think when you look at the hybrid across T20 cricket, 50 over cricket, and the way 4-day cricket and test cricket's played now, it's just a completely different product. And I think that's really exciting, particularly for the spectator.
What is the best thing about cricket now?
Apart from this moment right now with you, Spencer. Look, I think again it depends who you are. If you're a player now, it's a great time to be a player. Again, because of the amount of opportunities that are being afforded to players. So whether that's financial or whether it's global, the experiences you can have travelling around the world as a player now is so different. Those opportunities weren't there. As a spectator, you've got so many more choices. Because you have obviously different formats, different colour balls. So I think it depends what lens you're looking through. But what's the best thing? It's a great question. I don't know, I just love it. I think that the world we're in is incredibly negative. Like, if we're being honest, social media has had a huge impact and people voice their negativity straight away. And I think if we can flip that narrative and look at what's great about the game and how much enjoyment there is within the game, again, like I say, you'll see it through a different lens. And we want to entertain people. There's a lot of chat in our dressing room about entertaining people. Yes, you want to win, of course you do. And sometimes you have to do that the really hard way. But within that, it's still entertainment. And you want people to enjoy it.
You want to flip it around and be more positive. I was going to say, what's the worst thing about cricket? But you want to flip it around. So let's change that slightly and say, if you could change one thing about the game, what would that be?
I think from a domestic point of view, and with my head coach's hat on, I think the structure needs to be looked at. I don't necessarily agree with that we play too much cricket. I just think we're playing too much cricket in a short space of time, and there's reasons for that. But I think if you looked at it, you want to try and play formats. The Championship you have to play all year, especially if you play 14 games. But last year was good. You played the Blast, and effectively bar the Championship cricket in the middle. You want to get into the rhythm of that tournament. So if I was in charge, which will never happen, Championship cricket has to go all year. But the other formats, I would play in blocks. I would complete them because you get into the rhythm. People want the conclusion. If you look at this year, and again it's for different reasons because the World Cup's obviously on in the Caribbean, is we're going to play the group stages and the finals in September. So all the momentum that you build, you could put a completely different side out in September through injuries, overseas availability, England selections, lots of different things. And so for me, I think if you could look at the structure and go, right, we start here, we finish here, and there's a conclusion to that story, I think that would certainly, one, it'd help the spectators, but it'd help the players as well.
And what does this place mean to you?
Too much? Genuinely, it does. I think it's, I have conversations and people often ask me, what's next? What are you going to do next? And, as I alluded to, I've got a daughter, I love the Southwest, but I'm incredibly aspirational as well, but there's certainly unfinished business. And I go back to the recruitment thing, is you want people to understand. The reality is I think some of the people care too much, if that is such a thing, because it becomes obsessive, and you then can lose sight of actually what you're trying to achieve. So I absolutely love this place. People who don't understand, my daughter says to me, all you do is drink coffee and watch bat and ball, which is true to a certain extent. But you live and breathe this place because you know what it means to people. We're incredibly fortunate with the group of players that we have and the connectivity to the club. The way the modern game is, it'd be very easy for us to lose our best players to bigger clubs. And their love of this place, playing in front of you guys, that's why we get out of bed every day. And I'm incredibly fortunate. I haven't done a day's work in my life, let's be honest. But you know, I love it, and sometimes you can go a bit too far with that in some respects. I'm not articulating that particularly well, but yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate, but yeah, it's a great blessing.
Now, we'll open it up to questions from the floor now, but we've only got one microphone, so I think we're going to have to ask you to shout. Yeah, but it's very undignified to be live on the telly, running backwards and forwards, isn't it? Because by the time I got there, you would have forgotten what the question was. Any questions from the floor? That's quite far away. We'll give it a whirl. We'll give it a whirl. Hang on. Or break into a sprint.
I want to thank you for the start you've given us this season. You've given us a lot of pleasure, and it's particularly praiseworthy because we're I'll start again.
They can't hear you, so if you put that bit near your mouth, bit at the top, this bit here. There we go.
Did you get what I was saying?
Just a little bit closer, sir. Bit more. There we go.
Just I wanted to thank you for the start you've given us to the season. It's particularly praiseworthy because we've been short of key people. Just one little concern, we do bowl a lot of no balls. I don't know whether we bowl more than other counties. That's not the point, really. It hurts a no ball these days. I wonder if you have that concern and whether you're doing anything about it.
So we put it to you, Jason Kerr, that you've gone too many no balls and it's your fault.
I told you Lewis was a pain. No, you are spot on. So we are aware of it. The guys are working at it definitely. I promise you, I've had this conversation every year probably for 30 years. Because you'll get players who bowl them in the nets, don't bowl them in the games, and say that. Look, I'd never bowl them in games. Whereas Lewis bowls them in the nets and in the games. So I'm just going to throw him under the bus. And he's working hard with curves, you know, so they invest a lot of time, but he's tight the whole time. And it's a thing, it's really hard to explain, but there's a feeling when you deliver the ball. So when you do bowl, there's a feeling that you're looking for when you're at your optimum. So Lewis needs that to be pushing the line. If he's behind, just using Lewis, he's not the only one. But if he's, say, considerably behind the line, the feel's completely different and you'll get different outcomes. And this is the battle that we have the whole time. So we are working on it because what it costs, it hasn't cost us this year in terms of, we haven't got a wicket off a no ball, for example. But certainly with a blast coming up, it could be incredibly expensive. So I'll give him your feedback directly.
Any questions from preferably these two tables? Oh, that's handy, isn't it? You can shout, okay.
Well, first thing, if you were second team physio for 2 weeks, was Darren Vanesh your boss?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for God knows how many years. But from my point of view, and other people may have a different opinion, you bowled the best spell of bowling I have ever seen in that Leicestershire game. And the question is, because we've analysed this a number of times, how the hell, when you do that in one game, what does a player do when they've done that and they've taken 7 for 23? Yeah, 7 for 23. Every ball could have taken a wicket. You would have got 10 if it hadn't been for the tea break. What do you do then when you've done that and you're going, okay, I've got another 8 years or whatever in the cricket? How the hell do you get past that and carry on if that's not happening every week? You know?
It's a great question. Because again, if I take you back to where I was mentally, so the game before we played at Trent Bridge on a, like, you thought that was green last week, it was ridiculous. And I only bowled about 10 overs for about 15, so if you looked at teletext back then, or Telegraph, whatever it was, you'd go, oh, he bowled well. I couldn't hit the strip, I didn't have a clue where it was going. And then next week you turn up and that happens. And I promise you, the start of that spell felt awful. And it's obviously a great memory now. But I think, again, they're great learnings for me as a coach, because if you look, we've got some incredibly talented cricketers. And what we're all looking for is that consistent performance. It's doing it day in, day out. And that's why I get so frustrated when they say, oh, X is so talented. Because that's what talent is. It's the ability to do it. But I could go play golf now, hit one drive 300 yards and think I'm Tiger Woods. The skill is repeating it. And that's why the best are the best. So if you look at your Brutes or your Andersons, they have the ability to deliver the skill time and time and time again and keep asking those questions. Us mere mortals just can't do it. But you talk about the mental side of the game. So we'll see. And that's why social media is so dangerous, because you'll see glimpses of players. They're incredibly talented because they wouldn't get to this level otherwise. And they'll play in innings and people get incredibly carried away. They're like, oh, he's amazing, he should be in the first team, or he should be playing for England, whereas actually you're looking for that consistency. And so I talk to the lads a lot. I'm not interested in talent or potential. I'm interested in what we deliver day in, day out. Because it's not as easy as we make it sound.
That could play on your mind for the rest of your career, isn't it? If you do that in one session and then you can't be consistent. I mean, you've got your hat-trick after it. But if you can't do that, it plays on you. If you're an analytical person, it plays on your mind for the rest of your career.
But that's the thing, there's so much clutter in people's heads. So a lot of my narrative is trying to get the guys to play like kids in the back garden. So when you play with siblings or you grow up, there's no consequences. You don't think about anything else. You just watch the ball, hit it, and you bowl the ball, try and get someone out. That's how simple the game is, really. But the further up we go, we complicate it massively. And then performance affects that, because you do really well, and then you're searching for that the whole time. Or similarly, you go the other way, I haven't got any runs, right, I'm going to find a solution. That's the challenge for all the players. And then you throw into that surfaces, the opposition can obviously bowl well, etc., etc. So there's so many things that affect the performance, and the majority of them are off the field.
Looking forward to the social media headline now that says, "I'm not interested in talent," says Somerset.
Sorry, Spencer. Thank you, Jason. Excellent talk. Very top-level football coaches for anyway, just what's the latest on the two Toms? Abel and Kerr?
So Tom Abel's doing really well. I'm pushing the medical team hard to get him back. He's not far away. I anticipate he'll play some cricket in the next 2 weeks. So touch wood, he's doing really well. We obviously, he's had a lot of hamstring injuries. So they've been incredibly thorough this time, spoken to numerous experts, because we want him obviously available for the rest of the season. We want to give him the best chance to do that. So we're certainly not rushing him, but as I say, I anticipate he'll be playing in the next couple of weeks. And TKC will be back from the IPL in about a week's time, just over. Again, unfortunately, he's not had an opportunity as yet, but he's worked incredibly hard. Unbelievable experience in the comms that we've had with him, and he'll bring some real fresh energy when he is back. So we look forward to having him here in probably about 10 days' time, I think.
Jason, yeah, thanks for today. You've got a very talented bunch of cricketers out there that we've been watching progress through the system. Are you not afraid that a lot of them are going to fly the nest with the attraction of like Surrey, with the money and the Overton's line? Because you can't keep everybody happy all the time, can you?
No, we can't. We've got some challenges. As soon as everyone's fit, I've got some selection headaches coming up. And that's the predicament we want to be in. And as I said, the stuff that's really important to us, we need to keep that. The DNA of the club, the connectivity of the players, that's so important. Because Lewis, Craig, these guys, they could go to 17 other clubs easily. And the way, I guess, the finances are in the game right now, that's going to be a challenge for us. So the bigger picture is we need as much success off the field as we do on the field. Because we want to retain our best players. And at the minute, as I said, it's an incredibly happy place. Guys are working really hard. They're connected as a group. They love the Southwest. But there is a real threat that if we don't stay at the top table of domestic cricket, that we'll lose our best players, which means we just have to keep producing more. But I think, as you said, the opportunities for players now are very different, and it's becoming more of a market where people are moving around. So we're very aware of that, but we'll do everything we can to keep this group together.
Carry on with that. Do you think there should be transfer fees in cricket?
Yes. I think so. I mean, you look at some of their players, you invest so much time, and rightly so, but Joss is a great example. is that he's in our system from 9 years old. You invest a huge amount of time in him. He's a great lad. You know, he's had an unbelievable career, and we're all incredibly proud of that. However, you don't get any return on it. So I think inevitably it will come at some stage where, you know, like I said, the game's changed so much in the last X amount of years, and it'll continue to evolve as we move forward. So I think it'll be a matter of time before something like the football model comes into cricket. Especially, there's been so much movement. You know, it could go on. There's a lot of young players that have left and gone to test grounds, etc., and seeking higher honours and more opportunity.
Going back to the previous question, how does Pep Guardiola manage Man City? Did he put 2 teams in the Premiership?
He moved to the Owners.
And how did he physically manage it?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd love to know the answer to that question. I think looking from the outside, I can certainly speculate, but I think right now, if you're in the Premier League, what club do you want to play for? Apart from Everton. So everyone wants to play at Man City. So what they've created, so you go back to Man United 20 years ago, everyone wanted to play for Man United. So the huge strength there is that I want to play for Man City. And then the way they do things, because again, it's cultural. Simon Timpson, who's their performance director, I know. I've been on a couple of calls with him. What they create culturally as a club, so what we see is the end product, we see Man City beating everybody. But what they've created as a club is that people want to be there. So I'm talking about people who work in the shop, the academy players, second team, the guys, you know, superstars that aren't playing. They want to be part of that journey. So it's more than just the end product that we see on the park. And it's not just Pep, there'll be a group of people that are driving a culture that says, right, this is where I want to be. And again, I'm speculating, but some of that I do know through Simon Timpson.
Do you think cricket could learn from other sports on the mental side of looking after yourself and getting a performance?
Yeah, definitely. I think there'll be other sports that are far more advanced, certainly from a psychological point of view. And the majority of those will be individual sports. You know, you look at golf, Olympic sports. The mental side of what we do is huge, because to me, you are what you think. And often thoughts pop into our head, positive, negatively, and we react, and our actions reflect that. So there's so much learning from not just sports, I think business, anybody really. And we're constantly looking at other resources with the help of the PCA particularly, as we get other people in to talk about their journeys, shared experiences, and what the learnings are. But ultimately it's you as an individual that's going through that journey, isn't it? So we can definitely do that, yeah. We'll come back here in September. Look, I think one thing Lewis and I are really strong on is obviously very aware that we've never done it. And I can take that one off and move on. But I think that what's really important is we concentrate on the process. The outside world gets really caught up on trying to win the championship. You know, we see already Syria flying, they're incredibly strong. What we have to control is the bit in the middle. That's what we're trying to do, there's no doubt about that. But we'll try and win every game that's in front of us. But we'll just concentrate on Kent this week and put ourselves in a position come September that we're thereabouts. And it could be a really good end to the season.
Jason, I'd just like to comment. Your comment earlier on as you described it, we punch above our weight. I felt that for years, and it's over 3 formats. So, you know, I cannot imagine how you achieve it, really. Stretching resources and all this sort of thing, it's absolutely marvellous.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, great win last week against Essex, only 2 days. But, as a member who wants to see as much cricket as possible, and you know, you only really, as a county member, you only get maximum of 32. Can you stretch the Kent match into 4, please?
Yes. I'll settle for 3, shall we?
thank you very much indeed for joining us. And just from my point of view, one more thing. We talked about football and you know, you see players being incredibly inaccessible. How important is it that we are able to tap into the likes of yourselves and current players and former players for events like this? And how important do you see it is that you guys are still accessible to the likes of the people in this room, the members and supporters who you know, live and breathe for this place?
Yeah, it's huge. You know, hopefully that's come across. I think, you know, as a dressing room, we're very aware of our responsibility to the community, but what it means for them to represent the club. And they give, as you know, they give up an incredible amount of time to lots of different commitments. So as I said, they're really aware, and I think it's incredibly important. We'll continue to deliver that message to ensure that carries on for, you know, hopefully the next generation as well.
Everybody, Jason Kerr.
Another fabulous morning. And for me personally, Jason, I know how busy your job is, so thanks for taking the hour out and coming along. It was a wonderful morning to listen to. Everything from cricket through to head coach and answering the questions as well. Thank you. Spencer as well. Big hand for Spencer for the Q&A. And we'll be back here in 3 weeks' time. Look forward to seeing you there. And if you've enjoyed it, please share with your friends as well and invite them along as well. Right, thanks. Nice to see everybody. See you soon.